Hello, everyone. It is Irene here, Irene Lyon. I am here for our final Q&A call for 2022 for SmartBody SmartMind. Now, you might be catching this replay. I don't see anyone here quite yet live because it takes a second or two. So as I get folks on, I'll just give a little brief note that right now, today is the 6th of March, I should know that, Sunday, March 6th, 2022. And today is our final day for enrolling new members into my 12-week program, SmartBody SmartMind. And I want to make sure you know about it. So if you're checking out this recording, like after we close enrollment and registration, maybe it's end of March, April, May, somewhere in the year, just know that you can always begin learning with me at any time via my many resources on my site. We'll be sure that site link is somewhere near here. You can start with the 21-day nervous system tune-up if you're somewhere mid-year. You can start with my drop-in classes. You can start with my free resources. Of course, if you're watching this, you're on YouTube, so all the videos are here. Let me know, for those of you that are popping in, where you are. Let me know if you are an alum to my courses. Let me know if you've just signed up for SmartBody SmartMind. I know some of our new members are joining me on these calls. And then let me know if you are curious about joining this year and you have a question. I'm here to take your questions. So please don't be shy. Put your questions in. My chat box is right there, but yours will be somewhere else probably. Put in your questions. I will definitely get to as many questions as I can today. Just thanks to Crystal, who's here popping in links as I talk. I have two questions that I'm going to get to. And let's see. Hey there, Gloria. Good to see you. All right. I've got 13 people on the line. So like I said, don't be shy. Let me know where you are, who you are, and if you have a question for me. The one thing I will say logistically, I'll just go over some quick features about SmartBody SmartMind. So it is a 12-week live session semester. And so we do the program together as a group. The bulk of the content is pre-recorded. Video trainings, audio neurosensory exercises. That's my unique style of teaching folks how to regulate, how to get back into their nervous systems, into their somatic physiology. I have no doubt that during this call, I will talk a bit more specifically about those neurosensory exercises. Great, I see you guys coming in with questions. So the 12 weeks runs live. Now, one of the questions we get a lot is, Irene, what if I'm not done the content at the end of the 12 weeks? That's fine. I will be honest, and many of my alum, if they're here, will say, I didn't get through the first go, all of it in the first 12 weeks. There is a lot of content, and that's not to overwhelm you. It's just because I want you to have everything so that over the course of the rest of the year, you can self-study, you can practice, you can keep relearning, you can go back to the beginning, you can listen to the training calls, listen to the Q&A calls, engage with the group within the program site. So we are live for 12 weeks. I teach the training calls. My husband and colleague, Seth Lyon, does our Q&A calls. And then we have an amazing team of somatic professionals who are answering your questions about everything SmartBody SmartMind, all the lessons, all of the content, the theory. If you have a question about how to pace yourself, what to do when you have weird, mysterious sensations come up, if they're in there pretty much 24/7, 7 days a week. If you haven't met my team, we'll pop a link, meet the team. You can read the bios. So what's beautiful about this course is you're not just getting me. And the reason why that's important is because A, I don't want to be the guru and be the only one working with you and helping you. I think in any kind of learning situation, especially in academics, like for example, if you go to medical school, you're not just going to get one teacher, right? You're going to get all these different professors, different TAs, different teaching assistants. It's a communal effort to train a doctor. And the reason I use that example is because SmartBody SmartMind is teaching you how to become your own medicine. You're literally learning how to do your own trauma healing through this program. Now, this doesn't replace going to the doctor if you need to go to the doctor, or seeing a specialist, or getting some body work done, or maybe having a one-on-one session with a therapist. This doesn't replace that, but what it does is it gives you amazing empowerment, embodiment, knowledge about your physiology and how to work with yourself. So I just wanted to make that clear, because sometimes there's this worry when people know they have to pace themselves and go slowly. I'm all about pacing yourself, going slowly, asking questions throughout the program, figuring out your own way of doing it. So I'm going to go into the comments here, and then I'll get to the questions that were submitted via email. I'm just going to move my screen so I can see them. And as I do, I'm going to take some tea. Lisa, hello. Your question: I believe my 12-year chronic back pain journey is trapped trauma. Could SBSM be the answer? I scored 6 on the ACE study. 100%. Interestingly enough, Lisa, for those of you that don't know, and I actually think it's important for you to know my history, I am trained in exercise physiology, fitness, applied human nutrition, and biomedical and health science. It's a mouthful. And before I got into the world of neuroplasticity and mind, body, and trauma healing, I was working with folks who had chronic back pain, frozen shoulder injuries, you name it. Ankle sprains, recovering from knee surgeries, people who were needing to lose weight, get fit, build muscle, osteoporosis, neck pain, all of it. And I got into the somatic healing work because my work as a fitness trainer, rehab specialist, and Feldenkrais practitioner wasn't enough to work with some of these chronic pain situations. And while physical rehab is essential, exercise is essential, keeping our flexibility, tissue health, all of that, diet, nutrition, very, very important. And I don't teach that in SBSM, but we do have our pre-video series goes into that a little bit because it is important. But Lisa, what I found was that a lot of the tension that people were holding, it was in the tissues because of old shock, old trauma. Our physical system, it feels everything. And so maybe you had an actual injury to a disc or a spinal injury or something, but the stress of our environment will aggravate the tissues and it will keep it from healing. So when we're stuck in fight, flight, and freeze, and by the way, if you guys haven't done my healing trauma training, keep forgetting to mention that. The healing trauma video training series, it's a free series. There's 3 videos, there's worksheets, there's a lesson in there, an audio lesson. It explains in depth fight, flight, freeze. So I'm not going to get into that today because it's really explained there, especially video number 1. But if someone is stuck in that survival physiology, there's no good nutrition. There's some, obviously, blood is coursing through our veins, going to cells, but it's not as optimal. And so tissue areas that have been damaged don't recover as well as they could. I talked about this yesterday in my Q&A at 3 p.m. Someone was asking about, I can't remember if it was concussion. I think it was a concussion brain injury, and they were struggling to recover. And I said, I've seen this before. When there is intense shock in the nervous system, the tissues can't heal properly. This is why early trauma that is unhealed and chronic stress will exacerbate or create something like an autoimmune condition, something like cancer, something like heart disease, something like a hypersensitivity, because the autonomic nervous system is basically focused on survival and threat that might not even be here. It might be old threat, old stored stuff that is still telling the system danger, 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 but there's no danger. There's no real danger. The other thing, Lisa, I'll say is my expertise is in something called the Feldenkrais method, along with the other somatic modalities that I do. And there are beautiful, I feel like wanting to do one right now. There are beautiful movement lessons that are very slow, very, very titrated, which is slow paced, that open up and work with not just the tissues and the muscles and the bones, but how your nervous system, how your sensory motor system connects to those areas. Because it's not enough to just stretch out and try to get mobilization in joints. Physically, that might be important, but if the underlying nervous system is keeping everything tight, we have to work with that. So 100%. All right. Next question. Masha Kovacs asks, as an informed trauma release exercise practitioner, do you recommend your program? Yes, I do. I have some thoughts on Trey. I've experienced a little bit myself. I would say that the thing that is important about SmartBody SmartMind that might sort of be a little more differentiated from Trey is that we're building up capacity in the nervous system, within the somatic system, so that the release, the trauma, the memory, the sensation, the movement that didn't get to happen in a certain event, it comes out spontaneously and organically, as opposed to trying to get that response out. And I'll just speak from experience working with folks, Masha, who are trained and are also somatic experiencing trained. If I'm thinking about a specific person I worked with, I'll keep it very neutral. But as soon as they would go to sense their bodies because of their training in Trey, and again, this is nothing necessarily against what she had learned, her body would go into this spontaneous shaking response in one of the limbs of the body. And it was like in a loop. It was caught in this loop that couldn't complete. And what we realized was that her system was trying to shake something out as a result, I believe, of her training. But what needed to happen, it had nothing to do with the procedural memory coming out. It was actually early developmental trauma. And typically with that kind of trauma and insults to the system, the response that needs to come out is very rarely a shaking or cathartic response. It's usually not that. It is usually the sense of, and I'm just being very general, but terror. Sorry, my printer is talking to me right now. It's calibrating. We'll just let that go. Good time to take a moment and have a break. Spooling. It's spooling. It's possible you guys can't even hear that, but we'll just let it do its thing. There we go. And so when someone is healing, working with early trauma, developmental trauma, and neurotrauma, very often there isn't a procedural memory that has to come out. And I'm not sure if you're aware of what procedural memories are, but for those here who don't know, basically, if we have a trauma occur to us, something wrong that occurs to us, something where we go into shutdown and we can't fight and flee, there is a written procedure that says run, 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 or cover your face, or punch, or shout, or scream, or close your eyes. It's too gross. Don't look at it. And if we don't get to do that, that procedure is written, coded in the body, in the nervous system, in the somatic system. But a lot of earlier traumas, they don't have that procedure, because when you're in utero, your sensory motor capacities aren't online yet. But what is online is this sense of, I think I'm going to die. Everything is scary around me, but it's not cognitive. It's being felt in the tissues. And so a big part of SmartBody SmartMind, Masha, and this is for everyone here that is living with early trauma and wanting to heal it, we're working with the kidney adrenals, the brainstem, the gut, the connection between the gut and the brainstem, the diaphragms, to help give it the knowledge, hey, it's okay. You're safe. Let's just feel. It's not about asking the system to relax or release. It's about giving it that. And for all those listening, you can just sense this. Imagine if a little baby was being terrorized for some reason. It's not going to know what's happening to it. It's just going to feel fear. And so it's about teaching ourselves how to connect with these tissues and restore regulation back to the system. So I hope that answers your question. All right, Lisa, you're welcome. Okay. Hey there, Cheryl. You're a new member from Victoria, BC, and you signed up after doing the 21-day program. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to get to a question that was submitted via email first, and then I'll get back into the comments here. So one person asked, I'm writing from Sri Lanka. Hello. This actually, what I'm about to read goes perfectly with what I just said. So it all applies to this next question. So you write, I've had a very difficult upbringing, one where me and my sisters were not given the freedom to express ourselves creatively and engage with the world. So first off, this is so common. It's hard to convey how common this is, even in what would be called healthy, well-to-do homes. I just think that at this point in time, very few, well, now is a bit different, but in my generation, for example, I was brought up in the 70s, the 80s. Of course, my parents were before that. People didn't know how to connect with often the exuberance and creativity of a child. You know, we're coming out of, they were born into, within, at least my mother was, the Second World War, their parents, the First World War, the Great Depressions, the wars before that. And so things were very survival based. And I understand that there's still a lot of strife and trouble in the world right now. However, it's not quite like it was back then, where everybody was rationing food to the degree where we just had to, for example. So it's a little different now. But the reason I say that is because humans, we have this mammalian biological physiology that is like animal nature, right? Fight, flight, freeze. We have these primal tendencies, but then this human brain of ours is so magnificently powerful that we haven't all come to a consensus as a human species as to this is how a child should be raised. Because there is a way, and we have so many differing ways, and this is where we get into trouble. So that was a bit of a sidebar from this first thing about this individual not being able to be creative and engage with the world. So you said, my dad is an incredibly scary person, and I lived in constant fear. Because of that, I am hypervigilant. With this context in mind, I have a few questions. So the moment we can actually say, my dad was a very scary person, I lived in constant fear, I'm hypervigilant, this makes sense. Basically, this individual, and for anyone who fits this similar situation, the world was never safe. And because our primary caregiver was our world, we think that the whole world is unsafe. And that it's just not accurate, right? So the first question is, I have social anxiety. This also makes sense to me based on this history. My face muscles tighten when I make eye contact with people. My heart starts to race when it's my turn to speak, whether one-on-one at a dinner table or in front of a crowd. What is causing this, and What is causing this? Sorry, this is the question. What is causing this, and can working to regulate the nervous system help me become more relaxed and confident communicator? 100%. So everything you just wrote in this first thing, the muscles tighten, my heart races, I can't communicate, that is a sign of a dysregulated nervous system. Again, to go back to my piece about humans all needing the same thing when we're young: connection, containment, attunement, love, nurture, strong boundaries, but not boundaries that are toxic and violent, right? We need to learn right from wrong when we're young. We need healthy shame. But in such a case like this, the shame was most likely toxic. It was ridiculing. It was self-defeating. It was self-deprecating. It was this toxicity, right? And so the nervous system is basically learning to live in a constant state of fear, coupled with shutdown, freezing, disconnection. And so then when we go into the world and you probably know this person isn't going to hurt me, but the coding, the imprint, the construct of your nervous system is basically saying all people are bad. Especially when you were an infant, if you were mistreated, if you were handled with force. It doesn't have to be abuse or anything like that. But if you were always held with hands that were strained and stressed, that is going to give you the impression that the world is strained and stressed, therefore you should be strained and stressed, right? And then this, my friends, is what connects with the importance of working with the physical body at this very gentle level. Like I said, in SmartBody SmartMind, we work with the stress organs, the kidneys, adrenals. We work with the breath in a way that isn't breath work, but learning how to soften and kind of defrost these areas that have been so armored. And then the second part of your question is, I'm not sure if this is a manifestation of my upbringing or if it's my ADHD. I'm constantly fidgeting. So ADHD, ADD is a byproduct of trauma. It's as simple as that. It's a byproduct, again, of the individual, the child, the adult, the teen, not being able to land in their system because they have to be on vigilance to the world around them. Classic ADD, if we think about a kid or hyperactivity, they can't sit still. They're looking. They're looking for danger. That makes sense? They're looking for the next thing to hit them, the next bark of a command from their parents to startle them, right? And so if that's your world, you're not going to be able to just be chill, right? You will be in this reactivity mode because that's what your system was imprinted with. Now, the thing that's important to know, this stuff can be rewired. This stuff can be shifted. The fact that you are able to, write a coherent, and I'm assuming English is not your second language because you're from Sri Lanka, coherent paragraphs, bullet point, that shows me that your capacity to learn and to regulate is 100% there. So I just want to say that. So this fidgeting is a sign of dysregulation and basically constant, it's constant threat, right? It's also a way to help control in some ways. OCD would also fall into this. People that have had upbringings like this can sometimes become very obsessive and compulsive about things, not because they want things to be in a certain way, but because it helps them manage their underlying survival physiology. It's the same with eating disorders. It's the same with addiction. It's the same with overworking. It's the same with all those things that we tend to think of as just purely behavioral. They're rooted in the biology. And then your final question here is there any inner child work in SBSM? Not in the way that one might think of it from a psychotherapy point of view, but everything, in my opinion, in SBSM is inner child work, from the sense that we are learning, maybe for the first time, to treat ourselves with kindness, to treat ourselves with compassion, If you think about the kid who needs a little extra time in the morning, right? And they're constantly being rushed, told, hurry up, finish that food faster. We gotta go, we gotta go. They are in a state of stress in that situation, right? And so part of this work is breaking away from some of the patterns that we might still have that mirror and mimic how we were raised. And so when we start to do this work, we start to break down a lot of, we could say, chains, barriers that keep us from being who we truly are. I hope that answers that question. I'm going to get to the other question that was written into email, and I haven't had a chance to read it, so I'm going to just read it for the first time as I'm here. So this question is from Heather. I'm going to have a little more drink here. All right. So I still haven't ruled out joining SBSM this year, and I'm wondering if you can give a little explanation of the sequencing. So what this means is I call this neuroplastic healing sequencing. I've watched many of Irene's videos. I get the education component and the intermingling of practical and theory, but I'm wondering a bit about the why. Practically, why is Feldenkrais not enough? If one practices Feldenkrais lessons, would I need to stop doing that if I took this course, or it could be complementary? 100% complementary, Heather. There is Feldenkrais embedded in almost all of the audio lessons in the way in that I teach. But even from the first couple of weeks, we're doing some movement lessons. We're working with the spine. We're working with the head and neck. We're working with the pelvis. We're working with, if you're very Feldenkrais trained, the bell hand. We're working with coordinating flexors and extensors. The difference is that I'm also bringing in the principles and theory of somatic nervous system healing through the work of my training, somatic experiencing and somatic practice, so that these lessons of the Feldenkraisian nature are just a little more, in my opinion, refined. And so the reason why I got not out of the Feldenkrais work, I still teach when I teach my group classes. I haven't done those in a few years, but when I was doing my workshops, all Feldenkrais, everything was Feldenkrais I was teaching, but I had this trauma-informed and nervous system-informed lens. We've had many Feldenkrais practitioners go through SmartBody SmartMind, and it's just blown their minds. It's in practitioners, given them the ability to see how they can teach from a slightly different angle. And many of the folks that have tried Feldenkrais for their own personal use, who haven't had any success with Feldenkrais, have been able to do the Feldenkraisian lessons in SmartBody SmartMind because they are tuned to the nervous system at that level that I've been talking about, right? So Feldenkrais is not enough for some people, because some people it might be, but if there is trapped shock patterns in the system, early traumas that are pre-verbal, but also, and you know, for example, I've heard many stories of people that have gone to Feldenkrais group classes wanting to, because they've heard amazing things about it, and they get into this group lesson, this is a true story, and they started doing more developmental spinal movements, and it flooded them with all of the sexual abuse they had received, that they had been subjected to as an infant in a religious setting. It was terrible. And because the teacher didn't have that lens, when this person brought this information to them, it was kind of dismissed. Just go slower. Just do it smaller. And this is often what a Feldenkrais practitioner will say. And remember, you guys, I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner. I love the work, but they'll say go slower, go smaller. The trouble with that is if someone is having a reaction to something that early and that traumatic, what's going to happen is that system is going to be like, this is danger. The last time I felt this movement, I was being abused. I was being tortured. And in a moment like that, I would say to the person, stand up, get your sympathetic energy going. Feel, and of course, this wouldn't work in a situation like that, but when you have the understandings of what you're going to learn in SBSM, if you should go through, you will know how to track in yourself what has to happen that couldn't happen back then. It might mean completing a procedural memory, like it might mean that the arms have to flail like they're trying to get that person off. It might be a running response in the legs. It might be a retching, right? A gross, a horror, a disgust feeling. So the reason why Feldenkrais isn't enough is because the body is more complex than just the movement. The movement is important, but we also have to look at the patterns that are stored in the physiology. One story that you might really enjoy, Heather, and Crystal can pop this up. I wrote a very long, it's kind of like a case study of one of my first clients that I worked with when I had the somatic experiencing lens on. And she came to me with frozen shoulder, like she couldn't bring her arms past here. It was painful. And she had been tossed around the chiros, the physios, the acupuncturists, the massage therapists where I was living. I was known for working with really tricky to treat conditions. She came to me for Feldenkrais, but she didn't know that I was starting to learn somatic experiencing. And I'll just do a real quick synopsis because this will give you guys an idea of how complex this is. But she had been injured skiing, broke some ribs. And so with those broken ribs, if you've ever broken a rib, it's very painful. You have to kind of be very still. You can't do movements like this. You can't, like sneezing is painful. You're not going to take a deep breath. You're kind of going to go into a bit of a freeze position. What this did is that as the weeks progressed, her shoulders started to freeze, literally. It's a very debilitating condition. What we figured out is that that rib injury, it sparked the old freeze and shutdown experience that she had been living in pretty much her whole childhood because she was being sexually abused by being tied down to things. I know this is a big piece of information, but that's what happened. And so we had to work very slowly in a very titrated manner to help her body know that A, she was no longer being abused, that her arms could be free, but it wasn't about doing manual movements because everyone had done manual movements with her, nothing worked. And the thing that tipped me off one day was she was lying there on my table and we were doing some work, and it took us months to just even have her lay down because I noticed the moment she laid down, she would stop breathing. So think of all these people that go to massage therapists and physios and craniosacral, and the practitioner isn't trained to see that shift in physiology. They'll start doing work and not have any idea that their client is in a complete shutdown response. Even though they're smiling, yes, I'm here. Oh yeah, this feels lovely. They're actually not registering what's happening. And so one day I was watching this client on this table, and her arms were just completely like sandwiched beside her. Hands weren't relaxed. They were rigid. And I just said, hey, Grace, that's what I call her. That's not her real name. I said, when you were being abused, did anybody ever tie you down? And it was just an honest question, you know. We hadn't talked about the specifics of the trauma. I just know that she had been abused. And she looked at me and we laughed about it after. But she looked with these big eyes. Well, of course I was, as if I should have known that. And I was like, okay, thanks for letting me know. And what we had to do is we had to go into the memories, not relive it, but the feeling of being bound. And then we had to work with her imagining breaking free. And the moment that happened, her shoulders started to move. This is not an isolated case. Peter writes about frozen shoulder in his book in an unspoken voice with a similar tone. There are so many structural things in the body, tightnesses, rigidities that are rooted in these old, early, doesn't have to be early, it could be something that occurred last week, but these old traumas that are stuck in the nervous system response, but it's showing up in the tissue. So that was a very long way, Heather, of saying this is why feldenkrais is not enough. The cool thing is that when we get more capacity on board and we start to be better regulated, the feldenkrais work that we do just skyrockets because we're not holding unresolved traumas in our system. I'm just going to see if there's a follow-up here to this question. Your absolute goal is the absolute goal is really first time ever nervous system. Okay, so it looks like you're trying to figure out what both are for. I see. So I guess I just wonder practically what exactly are the benefits of the differences? Are the biggest reasons or benefits to someone backtracking from feldenkrais, so to speak, to a course like SBSM? So I think what you're trying to ask is what comes first, chicken or the egg? How are they different? They're different in that they're both great in their own way, but it depends on where the system and the person is. I always go back to the good old house foundation analogy. If you're building a house, before you even break ground for foundation, you need to do, the blueprints. You need to have some engineering design, and then you break ground, then you lay the foundation, you let it settle, then you start bringing the frame, right? But you're not going to put shingles on the roof before a roof is there, or you're not going to put in fixtures or paint until the drywall's in, for example, and it's solid. It's similar, this neuroplastic healing sequencing thing. We need to layer this stuff, just like you would never ask a newborn baby to clean their room. I know that seems a little drastic, but when we're born into the world, we're not fully regulated. We're not talking, we're not walking, we don't know how to sit up straight. That all comes naturally as we progress with a healthy, safe environment. So that was a very long way of answering the Feldenkrais question. Feldenkrais is amazing, as is the SE work, and they go together so beautifully. So I hope that answers that question. Okay, I'm going to get back into the comments here. Hey, Sue. So you write, I am a lay person and interested in taking the course. I don't have any educational background in this. Do I need any prior knowledge? Absolutely not. This course is designed, SBSM is designed for the lay individual, for just, the person who knows nothing about their biology and they want to learn. So yeah, you will be in for a treat to learn about all this stuff and how your system works and how to work with it. And then for those that are here who are already trained in trauma stuff, there's, like I said, there's someone who's trained in Trey. This will enhance and offer a level that I haven't yet seen even in my professional trainings. And I mentioned this on a call yesterday. Let's see if I can find the text. Yeah, so a little while ago, one of my colleagues who's actually on the team, she jokingly said to me, "What the heck are you doing online, Irene?" We had known each other from a professional training standpoint. We were assisting together, and she's like, what are you doing online? How are you doing this? I don't get it. And so she signed up for SmartBody SmartMind. She did the work, and she was way more advanced and skilled than I was at the time in somatic experiencing and Kathy Kane's work, one of my other mentors. And what she found was that what was taught in SmartBody SmartMind was never taught in the SE trainings, in that I am teaching you through the lessons and the theory how to integrate it into your own body, how to experientially learn how to be in your sensations. Because believe it or not, in these somatic trainings, there is not a lot of time, if any at all, for the student who is training to do their own self-work. These trainings are not for self-work. They're not, there's a byproduct, but there's just not enough time. And so if I go back to that question from Heather about neuroplastic healing, there's a lot of folk that are going into these trainings to become somatic practitioners who have never worked on their own trauma. They've never worked at getting themselves out of what we call functional freeze. And this is why a lot of the information doesn't stick, because when we're still wrapped in our unresolved traumas, our higher brain cannot, it can't compute as well. It can't form memories as well. And we lack the we don't have the same creative, let's say, capacity to shapeshift and be really kind of quick on our feet, right? Imagine if you had a physical, like a medical doctor whom is operating on a patient and something wrong happens and they have to go to their textbook to figure out what to do when a bleed happens on the femoral artery. That wouldn't be good, right? And if we think again, if I use medicine at the top of this call, medical doctors have so much training, and good ones continue to learn even when they graduate. And so a lot of the time in our community, in my professional community, people haven't done the training, the deep training to get into their systems and have all these different scenarios. So the reason I'm saying this, I've kind of gone off on a bit of a tangent there from your question, Sue, is for the folk here who are maybe already trained in some form of somatic practice, somatic work. It will really, again, I can't say this enough, it will teach you a level that probably wasn't given to you. There wasn't time in your professional trainings, and it'll just make your scope of practice that much stronger. I can pretty much guarantee that. So thanks for that question, Sue, and the second question that popped from that. The other thing I'll say to that, Sue, and everyone here is, because of our human nature and because this human experiment is still pretty new in terms of the tech, the industrialization, the agricultural revolution, all these things that have plucked us out of the natural world, our higher brain doesn't know what to do with the survival physiology that is reacting to stresses around us. And so because of that, our system isn't adapting well to the environment around us that is ever changing. I actually just wrote an article on this like 2 days ago on the blog, my blog. We'll post it below here. It really gets into why it's so important for us humans to become masters of our neurobiology and how we relate to the environment, because many people are not even aware that the environment is impacting them. And when I say environment, it isn't just, chemicals in the air and toxins, it's people. It's the things we see. It's the news we might see. It's what we might see across the street, all those sorts of things. So it really is an essential, in my opinion, practice to get this stuff under our belts, because A, most of us weren't taught it, and B, I don't think the world is going to get any less chaotic anytime soon. All right, let me just have another sip of water here. Next question from Christine. Hello from Boston. I lived with complex PTSD for many years, and I'm looking to learn how to unfreeze myself. Awesome. Yes, you will learn how to unfreeze yourself. The key is that you follow our lead, you take your time, you pace yourself. But yeah, unfreezing, defrosting is the name of the game. The lessons, even, last night, you guys, I'll be honest, I've been myself working through some very old traumas that I endured when I was really, really little. And one of them was around having my tonsils taken out. And it was a really scary experience when I was 5 years old. Won't get into the details. Let's just say it was very bad. And just last night and over the last few weeks, I've been experiencing little blips of the terror and the fear and the freeze. And even though I slept a full night of sleep last night, I woke up feeling like I was choking. And because I'm human, but I'm also a mammal, right? It kind of freaks you a little bit initially, like, oh, and the body goes into a bit of that state, but then you have to then I bring my higher brain on and I go, you didn't eat anything. You're not sick. You're not dying. This is old. And so I brought into my own repertoire last night the tools that I teach you guys. I held and touched and gentle, and I had a little water. I felt, I'm like, no, there's nothing blocking my airway, but there was a somatic something. We still don't know how this stuff works, truly, in some ways, but there was something tightening in my throat muscles. And I just held them, and I went and I ended up falling asleep in that position. And it's fine today. Full breath, full clarity in my throat. And so I share that, Christine, for you and anyone here whom has these weird, mysterious things that occur. Sometimes we'll never know what they are. You know, we just might not know. Our parents might have passed. They never told you that you had a surgery when you were 1 year old because you had, you know, something happen. And because of these things that we can't remember and know everything, we don't know our entire familial history. We don't know what happened to mom when she was carrying us every single day. She might not even remember that something bad and scary happened to her when she was carrying you. And so this is where it's super important to have this language on board so that you can track your physiology and your sensations and then know what to do. And this is what this program teaches you how to do. I will also say it's not something that you learn in a week, right? You have to practice. It's literally like you're learning a second language as an adult. And that doesn't happen in a matter of a couple of weeks. So also know, for those here who are considering, and again, I mentioned this at the top of the hour, you're worried that you're not going to get through it all. You got to cut that out, because this is a very different experience than being in, say, a semester where you're learning a trade where you have to pass the test at the end of the semester or you fail. This isn't like that. One of the features of SmartBody SmartMind when you become a member is you're a member for life. What that means is that you can come back next year when we run live and you can join, you can ask questions, you attend the calls. Anything new that I add is yours free of charge. The other thing is that you just have the curriculum to work with for the whole year. And we have got there's some alum here. Speak up, let me know how you're doing. Tell people here how the course has been for you. But many of our alum have come back 8, 9, for some, this will be their 10th time. So this year is the 11th time we've run this program. So we've done it a few times. So it's not new. All right, next question. Bobik asks, can this work help heal anxiety and panic disorder? I have been in mentorship teaching acceptance and response to anxiety for a year and still am having a hard time. Yes. So maybe you didn't catch this, Bobik, so I'll just give a quick overview. So anxiety and panic, remember how I was just talking about my experience over the last couple of weeks with high levels of something's not right, waking up, feeling like I'm choking. This is old survival physiology, which is a fancy way of saying our fight, flight, and freeze responses. So of course, I don't know your history and it's not important, but when we've had bad, scary things happen to us, or just this low level tone of, I can't truly be myself, I have to hide a bit of me, that squashes our inner true nature. That squashes our authenticity. And when we do that, it takes energy to keep that in. It creates anxiety. It creates survival. If we can't be who we truly are, we will be struggling inside because we're going to have to create a new persona for this kind of person, for that kind of person. My husband was in that boat when we met 10 years ago. He grew up, and I'm allowed to talk about him. We've done a few videos. If you want to listen to the video I did with him back in the fall, we're talking about the difference between healthy shame and toxic shame. We can pop that in the link here. His name is Seth. And also, by the way, Seth is a colleague of mine, and he runs the Q&A calls in SmartBody SmartMind. He is a wealth of knowledge and very, very good at answering questions as well. And so he grew up, and I want to share this story because for some of you, you're like, well, I wasn't beaten. I wasn't tied to things and abused. I didn't have surgeries. Why am I panicking? Why am I struggling? Even if our parents were good to us, but they had their own troubles. Maybe they hated each other and they stayed together for the kids, or maybe there was violence in the home, or maybe a parent was sick. This is one that often gets missed. If a mom, usually it's the mother is a bit more important in this situation. The mother has a mental illness, a chronic illness. If mom dies at birth, that is a huge trauma on little one. And there will be this sense, it's like a child being put up for adoption, even if it's with good intention and knowing they're going to a healthy, loving home, that is still an insult and a trauma to that little system. And so there's many reasons why these anxieties and panics are around. And Bovik, what you'll learn is the plethora of reasons why this can happen, but more importantly is how to be in your body and feel, because it's about feeling and processing these fight, flight, freeze responses and moving them out so they're not stored in the system anymore. Definitely be sure to watch the healing trauma video #1. I go into my swimming pool and beach ball analogy. Even for those of you that are joining SmartBody SmartMind, that's kind of the suggested thing you watch at the beginning to get that baseline theory on. So yes, definitely will help. Hey, Kieran, I'll just read out your comment. You say, love your work, Irene. I've been a year since a breakup, and I'm pleased to say I'm in a much better place. Awesome. Your videos were instrumental in the immediate aftermath, keeping me sane. Yes. Yeah, our relationships are super important, right? For those that are here that prefer to be alone and more introverted, know that at our true DNA level as mammals, we are meant to have some social connection. It doesn't have to be a lot, right? But we need a little bit of connection. And so when there is a breakup, when there's a death of a spouse or a partner, or a best friend or a pet, it can be a huge shock to the system, especially if there was old traumas, for example, where maybe we lost someone close to us when we were little and no one was there to help us move through that in a very regulated, connected way. You know, there's so many family systems that lose a child or a parent or something, and it's never talked about. It's just brushed under the rug. That is a freeze response. And the freeze response is there because up until now, not a lot of humanity, not a lot of people, especially in more Western cultures, they don't know how to work with this stuff. They just button it all up, suck it all in. We won't talk about that, right? That poses a very huge existential crisis on the biology. The biology wants to grieve. It wants to shout. It wants to pound the fists. And then if you have someone saying, don't do that, you're going to hurt yourself, or that's not right, be positive. They had such a great life, you know, but at the same token, you've got to grieve that. I used to live and work in a very active mountain community town. And I knew a lot of folks who died on the mountain in avalanches, in plane crashes. And the thing that pissed me off the most was when someone said, at least they died doing what they loved. Now, someone might say that's true, but that doesn't mean that the spouse, the kids, the friends shouldn't grieve it and say, this is not cool, right? That sucked. They were young, because everyone was young in that community when they died. So very important to grieve, because if we don't, that can lead to problems, stuffing all that stuff inside. Okay, next question. Let me make sure I don't have any other questions coming in through email. Susan asks, do you advise laying off alcohol during the course? Oh, I think I was asked this before. Also, does the length of time trauma has been trapped in the system affect the length of time it takes to heal and the effectiveness of this work? So to answer your second question, not necessarily, Susan. It depends on the person. So the reason I say that is because we're all a little different. And I've had some students say, yep, I pushed it too hard that first round. I should not have pushed. I was trying to be the good student and I overrode. I willpowered my way through because I wanted to get through it all so I could say I completed SmartBody SmartMind in 12 weeks. So I'm using that example because let's just say someone does that. Their chance of healing a trauma that's 50 years old will be, or let's do this a different way. Their chance of healing a trauma that's only 2 years old will be less likely than one of our 80-year-olds, because yes, we have people in their 80s, than one of our 80-year-olds who really takes their time, who is curious, who listens, who asks questions. And then when is asked a question and we say, just take a week off, they follow it. An 80-year-old that is trying to heal a trauma that happened in utero will have, in my opinion, better luck and better success at healing that 80-year-old trauma because they took their time than a 30-year-old whom had something like a car accident happen 4 years ago and they're just trying to be the good student and they're not pacing themselves. So that's a very generic example, but it really depends on the person. It also depends on the person's environment. So what I have seen, and I'll be honest, is people that can't maintain boundaries and who are, say, living in a toxic household where they're constantly in a state of threat because of the spouse, because of parents. Job, not so much, because the job is the job, and then you come home and you're in your own environment. That can influence people too. So if a person is still in a very toxic environment, that can have an effect on their body's ability to grow safety and regulation. It can be done, but usually the goal we say for someone if they are in a toxic environment and they are not a minor, is that the goal is to get enough regulation, get enough capacity on board so that they can extricate themselves from that environment. And then to answer the first question about laying off of alcohol, you have to be the judge there. So people's capacity to metabolize alcohol is very different. People's addictive tendencies are different. So it's a question of whether or not that alcohol is there as a positive resource and an enjoyment versus something that is really being used as a medication, as a way to calm the system. So you have to kind of play with it. But I'm also someone that says if you're needing a resource, even if it might not be the best, but it's not horrible, then keep doing it, but then use the tools in SBSM to ask yourself, do I really want to have that drink? Yeah, I do. Or, something just made me draw back. It's the same with food, right? So much of what we put into our bodies is very much unconscious due to past history, just programming. It's lunchtime, I should eat, even though you're not hungry. It's breakfast, I'm supposed to eat, but you're not hungry, like those sorts of things. So you got to really listen and see how things shift during the program if you do join. Okay. Hamda asks, will this help me get, I get excited. I see what you're asking. So I get excited and I go all in and then I don't complete anything. I have sciatica and nerve pain and I feel numb. I really want to change. I'm comfortable as, so you're very comfortable and there's fear of change. So this is a very common thing. And one of the things I say, and I'll probably say on orientation week, which is starting tomorrow we have our first call on Tuesday. I often say, don't get excited about the program. I know that's kind of a weird thing for me to say right now when we're still encouraging people to enroll and register. Be excited, but not via survival energy. Here's what I mean. So many of us are stuck in some kind of way. We're frozen. We have anxieties, all these things. And so when we have something shiny and new, it gets us excited. But it also can sometimes be excitement from a survival point of view. It gives us that endorphin, those dopamine rushes, right? It's like falling in love for the first time or falling in love with someone. It feels so good. There's excitement. There's energy. But we also know, if anybody here has, let's say, fallen in love and that you can't keep that energy, it dies. It has to, because if it doesn't, you'll never get anything done, right? And so one of the things that I see, and I'm really trying to correct this and say to my students, hey, watch this, is you want to have an excitement, but from a very grounded point, because you're going to want to be able to maintain the interest and the curiosity past the first 3 weeks. And having worked in the fitness industry and in health and nutrition, I used to teach people how to exercise like for a long time. People would come in New Year's, January, right? I want a fresh exercise routine. I'm all excited. Everyone's excited. And a person might do it for a few weeks. If they were lucky, a few months, but usually it would peter off by like March, like around now. And it was because that change, that desire, one reason is it was often superficial, but it also wasn't driven internally. So it can be very common for folks to have a bit of a, they have to course correct themselves, right? So I say, just treat this like you have to brush your teeth every day. I hope everyone brushes their teeth every day, right? Treat this the way you would have to clean up your kitchen, hopefully at the end of each day or a few times a day, right? It just has to get done. So again, think about this as it just has to get done. I'm just going to do some work on SBSM today. I'm not going to do some tomorrow. I'm going to do some the next day. So it's paced, because we do not want to burn ourselves out with the excitement. So yeah, and then fear of change is so common, right? Change can be terrifying for many. The key is, can the desire to be healthy and vibrant into your older ages trump the fear of change? Because that fear of change is the old stuff. It's the old stuff saying it's easier if we stay in this misery. It's easier if we stay in this ill health. And so know that there will be this tug of war. It's not something that just, shifts in a matter of a couple of weeks. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes commitment. It takes having a beginner's mind over and over again. So I hope that makes sense. Oh, hey, Masha, cool. You joined. We will see you in the hallways. All right. So Andrea asks, how does your work help with fighting and abstaining from compulsions and OCD? So it comes back down to that core element of what is driving the compulsion, the obsession, right? And usually there's something very deep within the physiology that's looking for order. So if we were brought up in a very chaotic world, everything was just, like a firecrackers. And it was maybe in some weird way exciting, but we knew it wasn't good, right? Or maybe it was abusive and it was just so dysregulating and we were always in fight, flight. That can shift a person into a situation where their one world of control is to be ordered, to be obsessive about something, to be compulsive about something. And of course, as we know, OCD comes in many forms, many shapes. But I mentioned this a little while ago, that this is also why a lot of we'll see kids do things to defy their parents. You know, when I was a kid, it was getting piercings, and then it was tattoos, and then coloring your hair, and then listening to really aggressive, angry music, and all these things. And then we just see, as the world goes on, there's more and more extreme stuff, drugs, all these things that come in as a way to control something, because they can't control the dysregulation of their family system. So let me control my world and what I do with my behaviors, my hands, my voice, my body, all those sorts of things. So the work works because we're not going to ask someone to stop that compulsion or that obsession or that addiction or whatever. We're going to work, and they're going to learn how to be and feel the body, and maybe feel the old crappy stuff that was happening when they were growing up, that they've buried inside and they don't even know is there, right? But we can't get to that stuff if we're not talking to the physiology. We have to talk to the physiology. We have to talk to these organ systems that have maybe been tensed up and super tight and on guard, or collapsed and in a state of depression, or maybe a bit of both. And so that's how it helps. We're getting into these systems that many practices, and certainly not talk therapy, they don't get to these deep physiological systems. So I hope that answers your question, Andrea. Hey, Mary, you're 77 years old and have had symptoms since age 11. Is it more difficult to work with traumas that are very old? So Mary, it's very possible that I already answered that question, because I just answered that question. I just answered that question. Sorry, I shouldn't have lost my train here of where I was at. But at the end of the day, I'll just repeat it again. It's all about how you engage with the course, how you show up for you, how you pace yourself, ask questions. I see so many of our students who don't engage and ask questions until the very last few weeks. Don't do that. No one do that. My team is there to help. Like I said, we have 11 staff in our forums, which is where we answer your questions. Most days, it's 3 times a day, Monday through Friday. The weekends, there's usually 2 people in there. My people love to help you guys. They are trained professionals. They love the SBSM curriculum. So the key, Mary, is to also understand that the symptoms that you've had since age 11 and where you are now as a 77-year-old, they don't know time. This is why it can seem like that thing happened yesterday. And your physiology thinks that it happened yesterday or that it's happening right now. And so it's how you engage with your system. That is the key. That's the key. So ask questions, pace yourself. But we've had folks older than you come in and do the training. And the one thing they say, and listen up, all you young people, all the older folks say, oh my God, how come I wasn't taught this when I was 30 or 40 or 50 or 60? My life would have been completely different if I had had this when I had my babies, when I was working, before I got married and got into this toxic relationship. So take it from the elders that have gone through this program, who prayed, like they wished that they had had this earlier. And then they also are very grateful that they got it now, right? Because here's the other thing. We age less when we have a healthy and regulated nervous system. And that is key. No one wants to be sick when they get older, right? So now is the time to work on the system so that you can basically be working with prevention. For those of you that maybe don't have a chronic illness yet, prevention is also key. All right. Peter, I just answered your question when I answered Mary's. So hopefully I've just answered your question. Teresa said, Peter, I'm 56 and it's never too late. This course is well worth it. Thank you so much, Teresa. Hey, Lorinda, you signed up. Awesome. Yes, I'm just going to read your comment because it's very, very appropriate. You wrote, I am ready to access a regulated nervous system with help through the guides to walk me into freedom from a life lived in a frozen state. Wow. Thank you, Team Irene. You are welcome. Yeah, that's a great statement to begin with. And here's the thing. Our physiology doesn't want to be trapped in its trauma stuff. It doesn't. It breaks down, our organ systems break down, our immune system breaks down, our hormonal, these things break down when our nervous system is dysregulated. Do we need proper food? Yes. Do we need clean water? Yes. Do we need minerals and micronutrients and sunshine and all? Yes. But so many of the students that we've worked with have done all of that and they're still struggling. And when that's the case, then typically, usually there's an underlying foundational situation going on with the autonomic nervous system that has never been addressed. And it's just because it's not up until really the last decade or so that we've really understood how pivotal working at this level is. All right. Yes, I am in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I'm looking at the city right now at the big skyscraper that's really weird. So yes, I am in Vancouver. All right. No, we do not offer scholarships. So for those of you that just know that you're not going to be able to join this year, I'm going to say a few things. One, get started with all my free resources. On the free resource page on my site, there are audio samplers, there's ebooks. Start with those. Two, do some of my drop-in classes. They're $19 a piece and they are quite good, if I do say so myself. They're not going to get into the deeper elements of the stress organs because we can't do that in that setting. But many people have benefited hugely from just the drop-ins. If you can do the 21-day nervous system tune-up course, that is a smaller course that is, it's been curated actually from SmartBody SmartMind. So it's a little taste of that world. And then the other thing is, and this is going to sound really old school, but start putting away some money for next year. I had an alum reach out and sent a note to me saying that for a year they put away, I think it was 20 pounds a week, and they saved good old fashioned way for the program. And she said, what that did was it made her more accountable and it made her more value her investment. So we're, at least my generation, we weren't taught to save money. It's kind of a weird thing. My parents certainly did in a different way. So that's another thing, like just see what you can do to put away a little bit. And the other thing is when you do join 21 days, the 21-day nervous system tune-up, if you do begin SBSM next year, we take off, we discount the cost of the 21 days from the SBSM tuition. Okay. Yeah, so for those of you brand new to me, just know that we begin tomorrow with orientation week. It's Monday, March 7th. So today is officially the last day for you to enroll into SmartBody SmartMind, and then we'll do this again this time next year. Oh, you're in Windermere, Peter. I used to know some veterinarians in Invermere who had a llama farm. Both my parents are veterinarians, so I've been in the healing and health world since I was in utero, a little tiny baby. All right. Liz has a question. So I've been researching. Let me just move a bit here, you guys. There we go. Remember to keep your bodies moving even when you're on the computer. So Liz asks, I've been researching and trying a lot of biohacking techniques, specifically circadian rhythm, but also the importance of being in more rural settings and out of the city. My question is, in your experience and your students' experience, do these biohacking techniques become less necessary as we get more regulated in our system? Great question. So I think some of the circadian rhythm things you're talking about, and I might bring some of these in as a bonus in SBSM, but things like seeing sunrise, seeing sunset without contacts or glasses on, getting into the sunlight, even if it's not sunny, and getting just the solar radiation on our skin is super duper important, you guys. Trying to limit the blue light we see from our phones. Like right now on my computer, I have a bit of a filter. You can't see it, but it's blocking some of the light. So this circadian rhythm stuff is very interesting, and I've just come across that too, Liz. The thing with those things, to me, they're less biohacking because we as mammals are meant to be under the sun. We're meant to see the sunrise. We're meant to be on the plains and see the sun set, and that tunes our biology to know when to wake up and when to go to sleep. However, because of our natural world and electricity and all the things we have, we've disconnected from those natural rhythms. And we know through history that whenever there's been another invention of electricity, of radio waves, this is when big, believe it or not, pandemics have come through. And so if we think about things like 5G and all these things that are just popping up, those do impact us. I have no doubt. EMFs impact us. So I think it is important to do some of these techniques to keep our rhythm on board. And then I will say things like breath work, cold plunging, which is becoming really, really popular. There are other biohacking techniques. I wrote a post just yesterday on the vagus nerve. It was on my Instagram. So Crystal, you could pop that in here for those on Instagram, and maybe we can post it up on Facebook or on YouTube after this. The thing with these techniques, and I'm thinking about, some people will ask, what about these vagus nerve stimulators, Irene, that like stimulate the vagus nerve? The trouble with these is that our systems are so complex. And so depending on our physiology in that moment, our history, our capacity, the biohack might be good for that moment, but what it's not doing, and I can pretty much say this from experience, it's not laying that foundational regulation that a baby needs in the first 3 years of life. And so you can't biohack an infant learning self-regulation. I think we could all agree with that. They need constant co-regulation, constant nurturing, constant attunement, having that parent know when they've had enough, or when they need more, or when they need to be held, or when they need to be left alone, or when they need a change of their diaper, or when they, you get it, right? And so many of us have dysregulated nervous systems because we didn't get that early wiring. And so to biohack that into the system, in my opinion, it cannot happen. Now, this is very different, and I used this example yesterday, like if I get a burn on my finger, like a 2nd-degree burn, 1st-degree burn, the immediate thing is to put it under cold water, right? To stop the burn from getting worse and to soothe it. When it comes to this regulation stuff in our nervous system, it's not that cut and dry. It's not that simple. So my experience is that as people become more regulated, Liz, we don't need the management and coping strategies as much. I'm thinking about a client ages ago whom had a lot of early trauma stuff. The history is not important. And when she first started seeing me, she would show up with this huge purse with snacks and water and essential oils and all the little tools that she needed to stay safe, to stay resourced. By the time we had finished our work, she was just walking in with her keys and wallet, and that's it, right? There wasn't that need for all that stuff because her system was just good the way it was. Now, does that mean that that system isn't going to need to continually do good self-care and not let bad things happen to them? And if something does bad, something that is bad happens to them, they still have to process it. this is the other thing. Doing this work isn't going to make it such that we never get a trauma ever again. The key is that when we do have a trauma or a stressful event in the future, we're not going to stick it into our system and hold it, right? So it's kind of like from this day forward, how can we all, even if you do SBSM or not, how can you, the next time you have a burn or the next time you stub your toe or the next time you have a really scary thing happen, you come back to your body, you ground, you feel, you don't ignore what is going on inside. So hope that answers your question, Liz. And I'll be honest, I'm all about being in nature and being in more rural settings. However, one can be in a city and be pretty darn regulated with these tools, because what's happening is your system is regulating and it's working with the environment in a very different way. Leo asks, have you encountered the problem of overbreathing, triggering cortisol and fight flight? I haven't personally, but of course that could happen. You know, this is where, again, the breathwork world troubles me a little bit, because it is creating a state change in the system, but it can also ramp the system into sympathetic when really what it needs is safety, right? So a lot of these, I guess you could say this funnels in nicely with Liz's question. From what I'm seeing, a lot of folks doing intense breath work, it's not harmful necessarily, but it's pushing their system into a state change so that they feel different. And when we aren't liking what's happening in our body, it can be very attractive to shift our state so that we feel different. Feeling different or having a state change in the moment is not the same as regulating the physiology. And so, yes, we can, like a person can hyperventilate and pass out, right? Or a person can go into really low breath and also pass out. Or we can create an activation. So that's the interesting thing with breath, is we can actually manipulate it so much that we do shift the state of the physiology. But again, shifting the state of the physiology doesn't necessarily mean, in any case, it probably isn't regulating the system. Hey, Gloria. Thank you. One of our 70-year-olds. I'm 70. And this really has been a lifesaver. I've worked up to the 5th module, so lab 5, and I work with some of the content mostly every day. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. Hey, Maya, the best course. Thank you. It's my 4th time, and it's a process, but it's so worth it. Yes, it is. All right. Great. Thank you for your comments. Okay, next question from Lacey. Yes, Lacey, I wanted to ask if this program has helped people with severe sides of chronic illness, POTS, ME, and CFS. Has it helped them stay stable, like from going homebound and bedbound to functioning? Yes. I don't have the comment anymore, and I don't remember who it was, but one of our students last year said that when she started, I think she was bedbound pretty much all the time. And when she shifted, I can't remember the specifics. She still had a little bit of that, but it was way, way less. We have stories, even from some of our 21-dayers who have completely healed through and gotten out of POTS and EDS and CFS. And many of our students, if you haven't, Jane actually is coming to mind, Crystal. We did an article highlighting one of our members. Jane had fibromyalgia severe and shifted that. A few others, Naomi Galinsky, I'm thinking about, also on our site. So the stories are there. And the key, again, about this healing journey, Lacey, is taking your time and going very slow. When we have such a severe illness that's putting us into this situation where we're homebound and bedbound, we need to realize that our capacity is very small and we want to grow it slower than most. but that's what we want so that the system can integrate and navigate those shifts. So yes, 100% we've seen folks shift. And then of course, you know, again, I've mentioned already, food is important, clean water is important, sunlight is very important. These elements that we sometimes forget, and maybe you know these already, but we want to have a multidisciplinary approach. And SmartBody SmartMind is multidisciplinary in itself because it isn't just one methodology, it's my expertise all into one. Sunny asks, can you talk about what the 21-day tune-up is covering? And is that sufficient if someone doesn't have problems with self-regulation early on? What is SBSM and how will it help in the ways that 21 days won't? Great question. So the 21-day nervous system tune-up, from how I describe it, and you can see on the site what is covered, it's getting into what I would call the basics, the foundational basics. It's giving you the biology of stress video training series, which is very comprehensive, and that is also in SmartBody SmartMind. And it's starting you off with the basics of orienting, containment, working with our posture, working with a little bit of the spinal movements, tracking tension patterns, relaxation patterns, feeling painful sensations, working with sensations that aren't painful to kind of, the fancy word is pendulate and titrate those experiences. So there's a lot in the 21 days. And we've had people have insanely good results with that alone. SBSM is just because we have more time. There are 36 lessons, audio neurosensory lessons in SmartBody SmartMind. In the 21 days, there are 9. So that's the difference. And then with SBSM, we get into much more theory. The one feature of SBSM that is not covered in 21 days, because again, we just don't have the time to, is healthy aggression and anger. So we get into working much more, and not at all in the 21 days. We get into working with healthy aggression, anger. We get into topics of shame, healthy shame, disgust, working with the viscera. So in the 21 days, we're not working with the kidney adrenals, we're not working with the gut, we're not working with the brainstem, the various levels of the diaphragms and joints. So again, the SBSM curriculum is much more robust in that body of work is exactly what at least I would do if I was working with someone who has early traumas. Now, of course, if we don't have those, then it might not be essential. But here's the thing. I did not realize how much early trauma I had until about 5 years ago. And it wasn't until the foundations from my other injuries that were more orthopedic were finally settled and healed and dealt with. And my other traumas around chemicals, which is another story in itself. And so in this day and age, I haven't met anyone whom is living in a more westernized society who hasn't had some form of early experiences that were very painful, very traumatic. And again, I was not beaten. I was not raped. I had a house, lots of food. My parents loved me. They did great, right? But it was more the societal stuff, the pick yourself up, you're fine kind of mentality, right? Those sorts of things. So I won't get into all of my personal history, but I just say that to say that we don't need to have these really big abusive situations or war or those sorts of things or natural disasters to, I'll say it simply. I have not met anyone yet who doesn't have some form of early stress, early trauma that has put their body into some form of functional freeze, right? It's just, I haven't met anyone yet. So I say that with full sincerity, but it's just sort of the truth. Ginger, I didn't see your question, so if you can repost it below. It's possible I didn't see it. And if it's not related right now to enrolling and joining SmartBody SmartMind specifically, I will leave that question and you could ask that within one of our forums, but I'll see if I can find it. Okay. Does healing from a very traumatic psychedelic can't say this today, psychedelic trip follow the same rules as healing from any other type of trauma? Yes. And so if we think of a really, really severe traumatic psychedelic trip, in some ways what's occurring there is the system is being fractured. It's like in some ways a near-death experience. It's in some ways the system has been thrown into a ringer of chaos and it doesn't know right from up, upside down, right side up. And what can often occur in these psychedelic trips, whether with synthetic or even plant medicine, is that the system's capacity was quite small. And the person knows I've got stuff trapped in here and they really want to heal because right now there's a lot of energy and focus on plant medicines to crack people out of their depression, their anxieties, all these things. The trouble is, and this is what I've seen, is that the system didn't have the preparation to grow more capacity at the visceral organ cardiovascular level, these levels of the physiology. And so what occurs is that this medicine pops us open. And if we don't have the capacity to digest and integrate all of the experiences to the end of the universe and back that we see, we can actually get into a very strong PTSD response. It can become complex. And it can also create organ systems to go offline. It can create the cardiovascular system to go wonky and berserk. So it is similar, Ro. And the key again is that we really need to pace ourselves and go slow and kind of reestablish being back in our body and back in the environment. Because yeah, these things can definitely fracture us. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Marie-Hélène, thanks for sharing the withdrawal from benzos and antidepressants. It is a real thing. It takes a long titrated journey to get off of those. So Chris asks, ulcerative colitis. So this falls into what I've been talking about, that ulcerative colitis, IBS, autoimmunity, migraine headaches that are severe, POTS, severe anxiety, severe depression. It is a situation where the fight and the flight are on high and the freeze is also on high, the shutdown. And the system, in this case, the digestive system, is not in good flow. And so the system is in chaos. And so what happens is when that is occurring, it's being driven by this autonomic nervous system that is in this severe form of dysregulation. And then some folk have a predisposition to be just genetically maybe predisposed to something like this. And then, of course, the system breaks down around that area. That's why some will have these chronic illnesses. Some will end up with, say, a cancer diagnosis. Others, it's more mental. It varies. But we need to get into that underlying foundational, as I said a second ago, foundational regulation of the nervous system so that we can take that signaling out of the system that's not allowing the gut to heal. Because a lot of folk they'll change their diet, they'll get rid of gluten, all of the inflammatory foods, and their gut will still not be well. That gut is being driven by that system, that autonomic nervous system. So it's super important to work at that level. So Ginger's question, can the freeze response look like low motivation, distraction, not completing things in life, but always joining things? 100%. And that's where I mentioned a little earlier that it's very important to not flee from health. So what I mean by that is, let's just say you join SBSM because you're feeling drawn to that. When we start feeling progress and seeing improvements, it's very common for people to start sabotaging themselves, distracting themselves with things that they know they shouldn't be doing, but they do it because the system is craving the old way, the old patterns. But yes, when we are in a freeze response, usually our healthy aggression, our anger, our life force energy is squashed. And aggression in a healthy way is needed to get motivated. We need that sympathetic arousal, right? But again, if we've had this history of always being shut down, having to store stuff inside, it's not good. The system will get used to that and will basically not know what it's like to have that vibrancy. And then the other thing with just constantly joining things is, I think it's a weird human trait where we feel like we're being productive because we're committing to something, but the key is completion. Are we actually following through? Are we actually setting up a routine, an accountability situation where we're doing the work, where we're figuring out our little, things, the little gremlins that keep knocking us off of our path? Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. All right, let's see here. By signing, yes. So again, when you join SmartBody SmartMind, your membership is for life. As long as we have the internet, as long as we can provide that course structure, you will, and as long as we're doing the program, you will come back and be able to repeat it over and over again. And the content is yours. So the moment you are in and the content is given over the course of the 12 weeks, that is yours to keep and to use indefinitely. Can you compare this to EMDR? Yeah, it's hard to compare them because EMDR is very methodological. It's like a method. There's a set way of working with it. It's very specific. The people that I know who have done EMDR, for example, who have early traumas and such, first of all, it's not recommended for early and developmental trauma. It works, from my experience, with more specific shock traumas when the person already has pretty solid regulation. For that kind of stuff, great. But as I just said a second ago, I haven't met very many people who are robust and healthy in their nervous system, and then they have a car accident and they have a little bit of PTSD, and they do one EMDR session and they're great. Sometimes that might happen, but it doesn't often happen. So the folks that have gone through SmartBody SmartMind, as well as my staff, I have some folks who have tried EMDR before they got into this work. What I've heard is that it can put us into a state of overriding. So we're in a session and we're doing these things with the practitioner, who again is meaning well. It's not like it's a bad thing, but what's occurring is if they're not skilled at tracking the subtleties already of their nervous system physiology, there might be something happening inside and the system is like, hey, what about me? You're not listening to me. I'm starting to clench your gut and you're still doing these movements. And then what occurs is the system goes into another state of shutdown. And then sometimes what a person might feel, and this happens in meditation for people that go into more spiritual bypass or somatic bypass, is a person might sense that they feel a bit better, but what's actually occurred is they've gone into a bit of a functional freeze pattern, which numbs us out. And so again, they're hard to compare, except to say that from my experience, EMDR is very suited for very specific things, unless, of course, you can work with someone who is teaching you the foundational elements. And most people just don't have the time to do that. And this was really, you guys, why I created this program. I was in private practice seeing a lot of clients one-on-one every single week. And people needed more than me once a week for 3 years. Believe it or not, there were some folks that I had seen for 5 years, monthly, twice a month, very severe early trauma stuff. And that still wasn't enough. It was good, but it wasn't enough. They needed the self-study at home. They needed to learn about their physiology. They needed the exercises so that they could learn how to track. Because it's not enough for me to just make someone feel better for an hour and do a little bit of work, but then they go off and they haven't really learned that on their own. All right. All right. Peter asks, I get a dump truck load, that's a great way of putting it, of cortisol right after waking. How can I regulate that, or is it just how I am? So if we think about circadian rhythms, we want cortisol to come on slowly. So this dumping of it, that's not good. In my experience, as we become more regulated, these cortisol levels start to become more fluid with our circadian biology. Again, that light in the morning, it tones us, it tunes us to be alert and to start the secretion of cortisol in a slow titrated way. It's just like the dark night, as we don't see the bright light, the melatonin comes on, which makes us sleepy. So again, depending on our history, a very common thing, usually people, there's two sides. Sometimes people wake up in the morning and they have no energy, right? They've just slept like a log for 14 hours, 12 hours, 8 hours, and they're not refreshed. That's very common. And what occurs in that situation is at night, a person is going into more of a shutdown response. They're not having restorative sleep. The body isn't cleaning up the toxins of the day, the waste products, because it's in a shutdown response. Other situations are such that as we're sleeping, we're a little bit on edge, right? And then we wake up, and a common thing, and I saw this question just the other day, sometimes a person wakes up, they have good sleep, and then the moment they wake up, they're fidgety. That there's an adrenalized, there's a cortisol event that's coming out, and that can be, and again, everyone's different, so I'm not saying this is the case for you, Peter, but it can be a sign of some form of underlying survival physiology that doesn't want to engage with the environment. And again, how and why that is not for me to say, because I don't know your history. But again, if we just use a prime example of a kid growing up in a home life, and it's a bit stressful every morning at breakfast because there's always this rushing. If that was our environment for like 15 years of our life, we've been toned to, as soon as we wake up, stress response comes on, right? Because now I'm not by myself in my room safe. I have to engage with this family system that's chaotic. So that's a few thoughts there. Natalie asks, I know I must first regulate myself, but is there anything helpful in SBSM that can be useful for teens with anxiety to regulate? I feel guilty that I unintentionally pass some of this on to them. Yeah, Natalie, this is a tough one, right? So I'm very glad that you are acknowledging that you did something wrong. They're having this because of your experience, your lack of regulation. Here's the thing. When a human is a teenager, they're starting their own life of autonomy. And it often doesn't work for us as the adult or even a therapist to try to help them regulate. But what does happen is that when you begin to regulate yourself more and you change the way in which you are in your environment, they start to pick up on little things. They might be like, mom seems a little different. What's going on? Or what you doing there, mom, as you do one of your exercises. So again, I think with teens, it's important to give them their space, help them set boundaries, nurture them, talk with them, have fun with them if they let you. But the primary thing is doing your own work. And really connecting to your own physiology. And you'd be amazed at what can happen just through them being in your field of energy while you do the work. Hope that makes sense. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up very soon here, you guys, and just say that, again, registration is closing very soon for this year's live membership enrollment for SmartBody SmartMind. So again, if you are feeling drawn into this world, really listen to that impulse. If you've been here for the last almost 2 hours, you've been hearing me talk and talk and talk, and we're just sort of scratching the surface of these elements. The course, the program is robust, it's comprehensive, it's education, it's practice, it's interaction with my staff, it's learning with me through our lectures, learning through my husband via our Q&A calls. It's a lifestyle. It's not a quick fix. It is certainly not a biohack. It is really teaching our systems how to be the way that they probably wanted to be early on, but we didn't get it because our society, our parents, our caregivers, our school systems just didn't know how to deal with the complexity of the human. And so very important just to know that this is the last little bit that you can get in. And as I wrap up, I will answer a few last minute things that come in. If you have any questions logistically, if you have trouble with payment, sometimes browsers are funny. Do not let that be the sign that this is not meant for you this year. Just email us, support@irenelyon.com. That is on the website. If you need to reach us, send us a message. My amazing team are in there answering questions. This is my last kind of formal Q&A for this year. We've done 3 others in the past 2 weeks. If you're a coach, if you're a healer, I did a special Q&A call for you guys last Tuesday, I believe. So if you want to check that out, you still have time to watch that and hear kind of my take on why this is so important for those in the helping and healing professions. It doesn't mean you should be necessarily working with trauma. This doesn't teach you how to work with trauma with your clients, but it will give you a better lens. So definitely check that out. Lacey asks, should I put my EMDR therapy on hold while I do this program? If you can, I would. Just try. I think that you might be surprised at what you get with the simplicity and the subtlety of the work. And then afterwards, it might be that you do that just to clean up a little, maybe you had a car accident or something happened, and you go to that once you have the language and you can track your physiology. All right. One person just asked, can SBSM help with extreme insomnia? It can. We've had people that haven't been able to sleep very well get into a better sleep pattern. We also know that what can happen is our sleep can get thrown off. So for some of us that have had really solid sleep, the sleep might get a little interrupted, and that's actually a good thing. I know that sounds a bit crazy, but what occurs is a lot of the times, and I just mentioned this when I was answering Peter's question, is that if we are living in a state of shutdown, of freeze, functional freeze, our sleep might be very, very much lacking in repair and rejuvenation. And so when we start to open up this physiology of ours and we start to move these survival energies out, it will show up often when we're sleeping, because that's when the stimulus isn't around us. The world isn't stimulating us. We're not feeling what's inside. And so there's definitely sometimes this action of the system having to go through a bit of a bigger wave. But then the key is that you continue to do the work, you keep regulating, you keep practicing, and then the sleep starts to, what's the word? It starts to harmonize. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, so sorry for the confusion, Sunny. So yeah, many of my students, my alumni, they come back and they participate live, right? So yes, like as soon as we finish in July, you have the program site. It's there for you to use. Humans are humans, and so sometimes we need to be directed a little bit. And so when the alum come back, they're coming back to be concentrated, to be prompted, to show up for the live calls, because they're always new. Even though I teach the same material, it's always a little bit different. So that's that answer. So the alum come back over and over again, just to participate, and you have the content for life. So that's how that works. Okay, everyone, I'm going to jump off because I have to pee, because I've been drinking lots of water and tea, and it's been 2 hours. So thank you, Crystal, for typing in the links. That's everything. Just know, you guys, that we need a lot of nervous system health on board right now on our planet. And if there's, again, this desire to do this and commit and invest and work with me and my team this year, please do so. A year is a long time to wait to come into this next year. A lot can happen in a year. The students who have been students of mine for the last 5 or so years, they have said over and over again that having this on board, it pretty much saved them over the last few years when things have been a bit crazy. And so just know that the more connected you are to yourself, the more regulated you are in your system, the easier, the more robust, and the more resilient you are with the things you can't control. And at the end of the day, our system, our body is the one thing we can work with and control. And so just know that that is a very important piece of this work right now. So with that, I will hang up. I will say goodbye. Maybe we will see you in the hallways of SBSM starting tomorrow. And the first call is on Tuesday. Be well, everyone. Thanks for being here, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.